Hi, this is Emily Correa, and the issue that I researched and will be presenting is longer school days and school years. First, I'd like to begin with a cartoon. It's a conversation between two men. The first man is saying why, in this time of our country's educational crisis, are students allowed 3 months off during the summer? And the second man is replying, because we've always done it that way. So I'd like to pose a question. Is this what people are really thinking? And possibly so. But there are pros and cons to having a longer school day. It's not necessarily just because we've always done it that way. So let me begin first by talking about the historical backgrounds of the length of our school day and school years. First, as many of us know, our long summers off and our vacation schedules were dictated by our agrarian roots in the United States. Also, the fact that we let our students out at about 3 o'clock for most schools is also for agrarian reasons as well. Um, the 3 o'clock end of the school day was started so that children or students can help their families with farm work in the afternoon. Also, I wanted to note that with the passage of No Child Left Behind, many schools started to really consider and institute longer school days and school years after feeling the pressure of fulfilling their adequate yearly progress, or AYP. Also, just to note, as of 2006, nearly 3,000 of the U.S.'s 90,000 public schools enrolled more than 2.1 million students on a year-round calendar. But even though that seems like a pretty big number, it constitutes only or less than 5% of all students, and almost half of these year-round schools are in California. And the reason is not necessarily academic or student learning, student achievement. It's more about crowded facilities in California. One other historical note that I wanted to talk about was a case study in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where in 1971, half the schools in Buenos Aires, actually primary schools in Buenos Aires, doubled the length of their school days from a half day to a full day. And so we'll look at this study later on in this presentation. First, let me present what I found about the pros of having a longer school day or school year. The first is there have been studies in American schools that saw increases in reading levels and math scores because of longer school days and school years. There are also findings that suggest that a longer school time helps students who are at most risk of failure, and it's especially effective when considerations are made for how time is used. There's also a thought that a longer school day would reduce the number of latchkey kids. And going back to the study in Buenos Aires, where half of the primary schools in Buenos Aires extended doubled the length of the school day, studies have found that the rate of graduation from secondary school was significantly higher, 21%, for those who experienced the longer school days, and this is especially significant for students from a low SES. The same study found that for students from medium SES backgrounds, the longer school day had eventually a higher impact on their income as adults. So then let's look at what the cons are, or possible cons are, for a longer school day or school year. In that same study of the Argentinian students, the researchers found that for students who experienced the longer school day but had a higher SES or came from the high SES bracket, they experienced the higher repetition rate in high school. After graduating high school, they had a lower income, and they also had more children in their households as adults. So that could be considered a con. In that same finding, the researchers found that the additional hours did not necessarily mean that they learned better or learned more. In fact, they didn't see a significant change in how well the students with a longer school day acquired a second language, which was mostly English. And the researchers in this study attributed it to the lack of quality teaching that happened despite the longer hours. In another study, the one con that can be associated with a longer school day or school year is the added economic cost of having a longer school day or school year. And we can see here that in some cases, by adding more time, it can add up to 6 to 20% to school budgets. In fact, in the case of Minnesota, when the state shifted from a 175 school day to 200 school day schedule, the cost to the districts in Minnesota increased by $750 million a year. Also, many of you may have heard recently about the study from the American Academy of Pediatrics that said that starting earlier may not be better for students. So if you wanted to extend the school day by starting school earlier, from a physical or medical point of view, not be the best for our students, especially high school and middle school students. So in the end, with respect to curriculum and teaching, extending school time, either by extending the length of the day or the school year, doesn't necessarily equate to better academic success or learning for students. It has to be combined with other things because there are variables besides the length of the school day or school year that affect learning. And these include the resources available, the teacher quality, administrative leadership, the socio and economic and cultural backgrounds of the students and their families, and of course the content, the curriculum that they are taught. Also, one researcher noted that there needs to be additional research into this whole field. So hopefully this little presentation gave you a little insight into the issue of having a longer school day or school year, and I'm looking forward to some interesting discussion. Bye.